Picture this moment: you're standing in the middle of a bustling coffee shop, surrounded by animated conversations and the gentle hum of daily life. Yet something profound washes over you, a sensation so isolating, it feels as though you've been wrapped in invisible glass. Everyone around you exists in their own vibrant bubbles of connection, while you float in a peculiar kind of silence that shouldn't exist in such a crowded space. This experience, more common than we dare admit, unveils one of humanity's most deeply rooted psychological phenomena, the profound terror of being alone. It's not the dramatic kind of fear that announces itself with obvious symptoms. Instead, it seeps into our consciousness like morning mist, subtle, pervasive, and surprisingly powerful in its ability to shape our entire emotional landscape. The fear of solitude doesn't typically arrive with fanfare. It manifests in those delicate transitional moments that punctuate our daily existence. The awkward pause when friends stop responding to group messages, the peculiar emptiness that follows after guests leave your home, or that specific Tuesday evening when your phone screen remains stubbornly notification-free. These seemingly insignificant instances carry within them the weight of something much more substantial, a fundamental human anxiety that transcends cultural boundaries and personal circumstances. What makes this fear particularly fascinating is its universality. Regardless of personality type, social status, or life experience, nearly every human being encounters this particular form of psychological discomfort at various points throughout their existence. It's as though our species carries within its collective DNA a shared vulnerability to the prospect of isolation, making it one of the most democratically distributed fears in human psychology. Modern psychology has developed clinical terminology for this experience: autophobia or monophobia, descriptive labels that attempt to capture the essence of fearing isolation, disconnection, or simply existing without the immediate presence of others. However, these technical terms barely scratch the surface of what is fundamentally a deeply complex emotional and neurological phenomenon that reflects the very architecture of human consciousness. The roots of this fear extend far beyond individual psychology into the evolutionary blueprint that shaped our species. Human beings emerged as fundamentally social creatures, with our ancestors' survival depending entirely on group cohesion, collective problem-solving, and mutual protection. For thousands of generations, being separated from the tribe meant facing immediate physical danger, reduced access to resources, and dramatically decreased chances of survival and reproduction. This evolutionary heritage created neural pathways that continue to influence our modern experience, even though the external circumstances of human life have changed dramatically. When we find ourselves alone, ancient alarm systems embedded deep within our nervous system activate, sending subtle but persistent signals that something is fundamentally wrong. These biological warning systems whisper urgent messages. You are vulnerable, you are exposed, you lack the protection that comes from belonging to a group. The paradox becomes even more intriguing when we consider that some of humanity's most remarkable achievements, breakthrough discoveries, revolutionary artistic creations, profound philosophical insights, and transformative scientific theories have emerged precisely during periods of solitude. History is filled with individuals who found their greatest inspiration not in crowded rooms or collaborative environments, but in the quiet spaces where they could engage deeply with their own thoughts and observations. Albert Einstein captured this contradiction beautifully when he reflected on his relationship with solitude, describing it as something that felt painful during his younger years, but became increasingly delicious as he matured. This transformation suggests that our relationship with being alone is not fixed or predetermined, but rather something that can evolve and deepen as we develop greater self-understanding and emotional resilience. The discomfort we experience when alone often stems from something more complex than simple loneliness or social anxiety. Research conducted by leading universities, including comprehensive studies from the University of Chicago and UCLA, reveals that solitude creates a psychological environment where individuals encounter themselves with unusual honesty and directness. Without the familiar distractions of social interaction, our minds naturally begin to examine questions that we typically avoid or postpone in our daily routines. These moments of self-confrontation can be profoundly uncomfortable because they force us to engage with aspects of our identity and experience that we might prefer to keep at a comfortable distance. Questions arise organically. Who am I when no one else is watching? What do I genuinely want from life? Am I living authentically, Or am I simply performing a version of myself that meets external expectations? Are my relationships genuine, or are they elaborate mechanisms for avoiding deeper self-examination? The intensity of these internal inquiries explains why many people experience such strong aversion to extended periods of solitude. It's not necessarily the absence of other people that creates distress, but rather the presence of our own unfiltered thoughts and emotions. In social situations, we can deflect, perform, or focus our attention outward. But solitude eliminates these escape routes and demands that we engage directly with the contents of our own consciousness. Consider an experiment that has been replicated in various forms across multiple research institutions. Participants are placed in a comfortable room with no external stimulation, no phones, books, music, or entertainment options, and asked simply to sit quietly with their thoughts for 15 minutes. The results consistently demonstrate that most people find this experience surprisingly difficult, with many participants actively seeking distraction or choosing to leave the room before the time period concludes. This research reveals something profound about the modern human condition. We have become so accustomed to external stimulation and social engagement that the prospect of facing our own minds without diversion has become genuinely challenging. The fear of being alone is in many ways a fear of encountering the full complexity and depth of our own psychological landscape, without the familiar buffers that usually soften or redirect our attention. However, there's a fascinating neurological dimension to this experience that suggests solitude offers unique opportunities for growth and understanding. When individuals spend time alone without external distractions, the brain activates what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a complex system of interconnected regions responsible for self-reflection, memory consolidation, imagination, and future planning. This neurological activity represents the mind's natural tendency to process experiences, integrate information, and generate insights when freed from the demands of immediate social interaction or external tasks. In essence, solitude provides the brain with laboratory conditions for personal development, creative thinking, and emotional processing. The very experiences that create anxiety also create opportunities for profound self-discovery and psychological growth. The confusion between loneliness and solitude represents another crucial aspect of understanding our relationship with being alone. Loneliness is fundamentally an emotional experience, a sense of disconnection, isolation, or lack of meaningful relationships. It's possible to feel profoundly lonely while surrounded by people, just as it's possible to feel deeply connected and fulfilled while physically alone. Solitude, by contrast, is simply a circumstance, the state of being without immediate company. The emotional quality of solitude depends entirely on how we approach and interpret the experience. When we frame being alone as abandonment, rejection, or failure, it naturally generates anxiety and distress. When we approach solitude as an opportunity for reflection, creativity, or rest, it can become genuinely restorative and enriching. This distinction suggests that our fear of being alone often stems from misconceptions about what solitude actually represents. We've been culturally conditioned to interpret being alone as evidence of social inadequacy or personal failure, rather than recognizing it as a normal and potentially valuable aspect of human experience. Transforming our relationship with solitude requires developing what might be called intentional aloneness, the deliberate choice to spend time with ourselves for the purpose of reflection, creativity, or restoration. This differs significantly from isolation or withdrawal, which typically involve avoiding social connection due to fear, anger, or depression. Intentional solitude begins with small, manageable experiments. 5 minutes of quiet reflection without reaching for a phone, taking an evening walk without podcasts or music, or spending time journaling without any specific agenda or expected outcome. These practices gradually teach the mind that being alone is not inherently dangerous or unpleasant, but rather a different mode of experience that offers its own unique rewards and insights. Mindfulness practices play a crucial role in developing comfort with solitude because they teach us to observe our thoughts and emotions without immediately judging or trying to change them. When anxiety arises during alone time, mindfulness allows us to notice the feeling without becoming overwhelmed by it or immediately seeking distraction. This observational stance gradually reduces the emotional intensity associated with being alone and creates space for curiosity and exploration. The fear of being alone often reflects a deeper fear of psychological depth and emotional authenticity. In our daily social interactions, we typically present edited versions of ourselves, carefully curated personas designed to meet social expectations or achieve specific outcomes. Solitude eliminates these performance opportunities and invites us to encounter ourselves without pretense or strategic editing. This encounter with our authentic selves can feel threatening because it reveals aspects of our personality, desires, and fears that we might prefer to keep hidden, even from ourselves. However, this same authenticity represents the foundation for genuine creativity, meaningful relationships, and personal fulfillment. The courage to face ourselves honestly in solitude often translates into greater confidence and authenticity in social situations. Many of our most important relationships are actually shaped by our relationship with solitude. When we enter social connections primarily to escape being alone, we often create dependencies rather than genuine partnerships. We might fill our schedules with activities and commitments not because they align with our values or interests, but because they prevent us from having to spend time with ourselves. Conversely, individuals who have developed comfort with solitude often bring greater depth and authenticity to their relationships. They're less likely to compromise their values or authentic expression simply to maintain social connections, and they're more capable of offering genuine presence and attention when they do choose to engage with others. The relationship between solitude and creativity deserves particular attention because it illustrates the transformative potential of embracing rather than fearing alone time. Throughout history, breakthrough innovations in art, science, literature, and philosophy have frequently emerged from individuals who are willing to spend extended periods in solitude, wrestling with complex ideas or pursuing creative visions that couldn't be developed in collaborative environments. The creative process often requires a kind of psychological space that's difficult to maintain in social settings. Ideas need time to develop, evolve, and mature without the immediate pressure of external feedback or social expectations. Many artists, writers, and inventors describe their most productive periods as times when they deliberately withdrew from social obligations to focus entirely on their creative work. This doesn't mean that collaboration and social input aren't valuable in creative endeavors, but rather that both solitude and social engagement serve different but complementary functions in the creative process. Solitude provides the psychological laboratory where initial ideas can emerge and develop, while social interaction offers opportunities for feedback, refinement, and sharing of completed work. Modern technology presents both opportunities and challenges for developing a healthy relationship with solitude. Digital devices offer unprecedented access to information, entertainment, and social connection, making it easier than ever to avoid extended periods of being alone with our thoughts. The constant availability of distractions means that many people have little experience with genuine solitude, even when they're physically alone. At the same time, technology can also support intentional solitude when used mindfully. Meditation apps, journaling software, and even carefully curated music playlists can enhance rather than interrupt the solitary experience. The key lies in using technology as a tool for deepening self-awareness rather than as an escape from self-examination. The challenge of maintaining solitude in a hyper-connected world requires developing new skills of attention and intention. It means learning to recognize when we're using technology to avoid being present with ourselves and developing the discipline to periodically disconnect from digital stimulation in order to reconnect with our inner experience. Emotional resilience research consistently demonstrates that individuals who can tolerate and even enjoy solitude tend to demonstrate higher levels of self-awareness, creativity, and psychological stability. They're better equipped to handle challenges and setbacks because they've developed internal resources for processing difficult emotions and generating solutions to problems. This resilience stems partly from the self-knowledge that develops through regular periods of reflection and introspection. When we understand our own emotional patterns, triggers, and coping mechanisms, we're better prepared to navigate difficult situations and make decisions that align with our authentic values and goals. Additionally, comfort with solitude reduces dependence on external validation and approval for emotional stability. While social support remains important for psychological health, individuals who are comfortable being alone are less likely to compromise their integrity or authentic expression simply to maintain social acceptance. The practice of embracing solitude also cultivates what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to experience uncomfortable emotions without immediately seeking relief through distraction or avoidance. This skill proves valuable not only during alone time, but in all areas of life where patience, persistence, and emotional regulation are required. As we develop greater comfort with being alone, we often discover that solitude offers unique opportunities for processing and integrating life experiences. The quiet space of aloneness allows us to reflect on recent events, understand our emotional responses, and extract meaning and learning from our experiences. This processing function of solitude serves as a form of psychological maintenance, helping to prevent the accumulation of unresolved emotions or unexamined experiences that can contribute to anxiety, depression, or relationship difficulties. Regular periods of solitary reflection can function like physical exercise for emotional health, challenging in the moment, but ultimately strengthening our overall psychological resilience. The fear of being alone also intersects with our broader relationship with uncertainty and impermanence. When we're alone, we're more likely to become aware of the transient nature of relationships, experiences, and life itself. This awareness can initially generate anxiety, but it can also cultivate a deeper appreciation for the present moment and the connections we do have. Solitude teaches us that while external circumstances and relationships inevitably change, our relationship with ourselves remains constant throughout our lives. Learning to develop and maintain this internal relationship provides a stable foundation that can support us through various life transitions and challenges. The philosophical implications of embracing solitude extend beyond individual psychology to questions about the nature of human fulfillment and meaning. Many wisdom traditions, from ancient Stoicism to Buddhist meditation practices, emphasize the importance of developing inner resources and self-knowledge as foundations for a meaningful life. These traditions suggest that the fear of being alone often reflects an over-reliance on external sources of validation, entertainment, and identity. By gradually developing comfort with solitude, we begin to discover internal sources of satisfaction, creativity, and peace that don't depend on external circumstances or other people's presence or approval. This doesn't mean that relationships and social connections become unimportant, but rather that they can be approached from a position of internal stability rather than desperate need. When we're comfortable with ourselves, we can choose relationships and social activities based on genuine compatibility and shared interests, rather than simply to avoid being alone. The journey from fearing to embracing solitude is rarely linear or predictable. Most people experience waves of comfort and discomfort as they gradually develop new ways of relating to alone time. There may be periods of genuine enjoyment of solitude followed by times when being alone feels challenging or uncomfortable again. This variability is normal and doesn't represent failure or regression. Like any skill, comfort with solitude develops gradually through practice and patience. Each experience of choosing to remain present during difficult emotions or uncomfortable thoughts contributes to building the psychological muscles required for true self-companionship. As we become more comfortable with being alone, we often discover that solitude offers a unique form of freedom from social expectations, performance pressure, and the need to manage other people's emotions or reactions. This freedom creates space for authentic self-expression, honest self-evaluation, and the exploration of interests and activities that we might be hesitant to pursue in social settings. The ultimate transformation of our relationship with solitude occurs when we begin to view alone time not as something to endure, but as something to treasure. This shift represents a fundamental change in how we understand ourselves and our place in the world. Instead of seeing ourselves as incomplete without others, we begin to recognize our inherent wholeness and capacity for self-sufficiency. This recognition doesn't diminish the value of relationships or social connection, but it does change how we approach them. When we know that we can be happy and fulfilled alone, our relationships become choices rather than necessities. We can engage with others from a position of strength and authenticity rather than need and dependence. The fear of being alone, when understood and gradually transformed, becomes a pathway to some of life's most profound rewards. Self-knowledge, creative expression, emotional resilience, and authentic relationships. What began as anxiety transforms into curiosity, and what felt like emptiness reveals itself as potential. In our increasingly connected but often superficial world, the ability to be genuinely present with ourselves becomes not just a personal skill, but a radical act of self-respect and authenticity. It represents a commitment to knowing and accepting ourselves fully, which forms the foundation for all meaningful growth and connection. The quiet moments that once felt threatening become sanctuaries of reflection and renewal. The internal questions that once generated anxiety become opportunities for insight and understanding. And the solitude that once felt like punishment reveals itself as one of life's most precious gifts, the gift of coming home to ourselves, again and again, with curiosity, compassion, and courage. Through this transformation, we discover that we are never truly alone because we carry within ourselves the most important companion we will ever have, our own conscious, creative, capable self. And with this realization comes a profound sense of freedom, resilience, and joy that no external circumstance can diminish or destroy.